it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink and listen.
Killer vs. Killer. Chapter 1. The Chances. There was something eerie about that evening. The wind was witnessing the gloom that covered the city. The streetlights were trying to light up every dark corner, as if they were afraid that if they didn't, something sinister might develop. A stray dog was lurking in the street, looking for something to eat, and it stopped to smell a piece of garbage beside the pedestrian path. He was just trying to decide if the piece was edible when his eyes lit up, and its head jerked in response to the sudden development. I turned on the light of the living room and looked outside the window at the stray dog, who stared at me for a second and then went along to do whatever it was doing. I looked across the street and the hazy sky. It was so calm that one wouldn't suspect a thing before stepping out of his home. I looked around at all the other houses in the streets. Their blinds were closed as if they didn't want to witness such a gloomy night, as if they wanted to skip this evening. I felt I should do so too, so I closed my blinds, but when I turned away from the window, I wondered if I could skip the evening. And, well, I realized I could, but the thing was, I didn't want to. How many times does one get a chance like this? I looked at the clock on the wall. It was just about to be 8 o'clock. Oh, they're not going to be back before 11. I've got 3 hours to do anything I want. I said out loud, just out of the excitement that I had the house to myself for another 3 hours. I lunged at the couch, reached out to grab the remote, and turned on the television. I could watch whatever I wanted. I was surfing through the channels when my eyes caught the headline on a news channel. Serial killer at large. I stopped and started watching the news. The reporter was speaking. The police cannot even confirm if the murder was committed by the same killer. So does that mean that there could be more than one killer operating in this city? Holy shit, I thought. 2 serial killers loose around the city. I wondered what the chances were that they'd both end up at the same place. Well, there is no need to panic right now. The officer who the reporter was interviewing spoke. He didn't seem very confident about his words, though. We are not sure if this is the same killer, but we are investigating. Meanwhile, I suggest everyone stay calm and report anything suspicious around you. Oh, boy. I realized I was hungry, so I turned the television off and went into the kitchen, right next to the living room. I opened the fridge but closed it again immediately. I'm going to cook myself, I thought. Half an hour later, the kitchen was filled with the smell of heating oil, spices, and freshly cut tomatoes and onions. And I turned the television back on just for a bit of background noise, and honestly, well, because I could do it. I sat back on the couch with my dinner. I wanted to enjoy it, watching a sitcom. Well, I was searching for one, but again I stopped on the news channel. I don't know why. The reporter was extensively explaining the differences between the last 2 incidents. But the second one, which happened the night before, was all across the city. The victim was alone in the house. Her husband was away for work. Then they cut to the interview of a neighbor. Her husband was out of town just for 2 days. It was unfortunate that the killer came across the neighborhood just when she was alone. They then cut to another one. Well, I felt like someone just walked across my window. I just didn't think he'd bother us because there were 5 of us in the house that night. After a few minutes, I looked through the window. Her house was in complete darkness. Not one light was on. Well, I found it strange because they never have all their lights off. They even sleep with their nightlight on. There was no chance she would sleep in the complete dark when she was alone. It wasn't even her bedtime. He was speaking without stopping to breathe. I thought he wanted to finish this as quick as possible. I brought that to my wife's notice. We even considered calling her just to check out if we could do anything. We heard a scream. It was a horrible scream, and it stopped midway. He stopped to breathe. That's when we called the cops. They cut back to the reporter. She now began to describe the crime scene. Her body was found in the middle of the living room. There was no sign of struggle. It looked like she didn't notice the killer breaking in. She was stabbed with a knife in the back a few times. Oh my God. I couldn't help but to say out loud, "That is so..." And I couldn't finish because I suddenly found myself in the complete dark. The power was out. I stood up and looked around to understand what was happening, when I felt someone move around outside the living room. There was someone else in the house. Chapter 2. The Smile. I couldn't think about anything for a second. Someone was in my house, and given the conditions, I was like dead sure of who it was. It was so quiet and dark that one would be scared to death right now. Oh man, I was just kidding about those chances. I don't want to do this right now, I said under my breath. I started to think. He must have pulled the main switch right beside the exit, which means he's going to enter from the door behind me. I crouched down and walked slowly on my toes in the opposite direction towards the kitchen. I stayed there, trying to listen. I didn't hear a thing. It seemed like he was gliding above the ground, while I was planning my strategy to get out of this situation. I pictured the whole layout of the house in my head again. The front half of the house was relatively open except for the storeroom and the bathroom in the far end opposite to the living room. The rear bedroom had another door which opened in the corridor right in front of the kitchen. So count them in too. I could use that door to get into the rear bedroom and go to the front bedroom from the other door. And from there I could use the other door, which would get me into the corridor right in front of the main exit. Yeah, that was it. I started walking towards the kitchen door. I still didn't hear anything. It was so quiet that I was sure I would at least hear him breathe. I stepped into the corridor. The main exit was at the other end on my left. I could run, but I didn't want to risk it because I'd have to cross the living room on my left. I slowly opened the door of the bedroom in front of me, trying not to make any noises, but still made a faint sound of clicking. I didn't shut it behind me. Instead, I quickly walked to the other door at the other end on the left wall. I grabbed the knob of the door to open it, but it was already open. Well, I didn't even have to process it. If this door was open and the other one was closed, then that meant he was in this room right now. I threw the door open and quickly dashed out. The door slammed on the wall behind me, and for the first time I heard his footsteps. I didn't think. I got into the front bedroom. The door was open. So instead of the living room on his right from the entrance, he turned left into this bedroom and left through the other door and hid in the rear bedroom. Did he know I was going to go that way? How could he? I slowly walked into the corridor, just a few steps away from the exit. I let the air out of my lungs, grabbed and turned the knob of the door except, well, it didn't turn. The door was locked. Damn it. Can these doors even be locked from the inside? God, he's good, I thought. I turned back and looked into the dark corridor. There was only one way I could go now, back into the living room on my right. I slowly entered the living room and... what the hell? I thought. Someone just pulled the blinds open. The streetlight fell on the living room floor, and there he was, standing right beside the window. He planned all of this. I looked at him and thought. He was standing so precisely that I could only see the upper half of his grubby, sweat-soaked, dark green shirt, his flaring nostrils like he was taking the scent of the fear of his prey, and his dry, petulant, and belligerent lips, which then stretched into a smile, an evil, broad, and obnoxious smile, a smile that made me freeze dead right in my spot. I looked at him smiling, and I just kept looking. I couldn't turn away, and for the first time in my life, I felt my heart. It was pounding in my chest. He must have heard it too. He knew that whatever he was doing, it was working. He was like Medusa, who just turned me into stone with his smile instead of his gaze. I couldn't resist but thinking, wow, he's really good. I wanted to say it to him, that I was impressed with his move. I mean, he killed people, but still. I was so impressed by his game, I almost said, I admire you and your game. Yep, I want to play it. He didn't do anything like moving towards me, or raising his hand holding a knife, or saying something like, you are dead, or anything at all. He and I both knew that he didn't have to. We knew that he got me. One couldn't do anything in this situation. Whether one runs away or towards him, he's got him. Whether one cries, screams, or stays quiet, he's got him. It was his game and his rules. So I did the last thing you'd expect. Looked straight at him, and I smiled back. Chapter 3. Killer versus Killer. Nothing happened for quite some time. It could have been after days, or it could have been the very next moment. His smile widened. He understood me just like I understood him. At that moment, no two people knew each other better than we did. It was a silent agreement. We were impressed by each other. We admired each other. We communicated that with just a smile. We didn't say anything, but if we had, we probably would have said, it's gonna be prodigious. He pulled the blind shut again, and thus began our game. I felt him move, and I slowly, sneakily walked backwards into the bedroom and shut the door. I walked to the other door and shut that as well. Now, if I knew him, he'd want to end this quickly, no matter how much he enjoys this, which meant that I had to be patient. I curled up in a corner from where I could see both the doors. If he entered from one, I could get out from the other. Time passed. The only thing I could hear was the ticking noise from the clock on the wall, like it was a referee for our game and was keeping track of the time. But isn't that true for all of us? I thought. That time is a referee for the stupid little game we call life. It keeps track of all our choices, good and bad. One bad decision, and the game's over. Well, one of us was going to make a bad choice tonight. Suddenly I heard the soft sound of the lock clicking open on my left. He must have taken the kitchen round. I slowly got up and was ready to walk out the other door, but he didn't enter the room. I had my hand on the knob of the door, and I was waiting when I felt the knob turning in my hand. He was just outside the door. I quickly let go of the knob and got back into the corner. I heard the lock click open. I waited, but nothing happened. So, he was playing with me. He wasn't in a hurry at all. He was taking his time. So I didn't know him the way he knew me. So to beat him in his game, I had to be not me. Just when I was thinking to be impulsive, the clock on the wall chimed. And I knew that was my chance. I walked through the door to the other bedroom, but I didn't go in. I turned right and walked straight into the kitchen. If I wanted to turn this game around, I needed a weapon. I couldn't do it my way. I was looking for something to work with, like a knife, when I felt him in the kitchen, and before I could even think of anything, I heard a knife sliding out of the knife block. He was thinking the same thing. So I grabbed the first thing I could and ran out as fast as possible. I tucked it under my shirt and ran through the corridor, the rear bedroom, the front bedroom, and I was back in the corridor, right next to the exit. In front of me was the living room. I looked into the darkness, and a thought popped in my mind. He had me in the darkness, but he can't hide in the light. He can't play his game if I could see him. I walked inside the living room, approached the window, threw my hand to grab the lift cord, but instead my hand grabbed something else. Something big, sweaty, and cold. His hand. That was the second time I felt my heart in my chest, and perhaps he did too. This was his final move. He got me. The game was over. I heard him swish his knife. There was no kidding around here, so I ran for my life. I ran past the 2 bedrooms and the boundary that separated the open part of the house from the dead end in the far end opposite to the living room. I was standing at the end, staring at the wall. On my right was the bathroom, and on the left was the storeroom. He was probably inching his way towards me. Now, there was nowhere left to go. I opened the bathroom door but didn't enter. I left the door open and got in the storeroom and shut the door. I was standing in complete darkness, unable to see even my hands, when I heard him, more like felt him. It seemed like he was gliding towards me. Now he was standing just outside the door. I was thinking, if he goes in the bathroom first, he'd have his back towards me, and that would be my only chance. But unfortunately, for him, I smiled. He was thinking the same thing. Suddenly he threw the door open and grabbed my neck. I could hear him breathe. It was pitch black, but I knew he was smiling, and without saying anything, without any prompt, he plunged his knife into my stomach, except it didn't go in. It clinked on the pan under my shirt. He was taken aback by the sudden developments which he wasn't expecting. I didn't waste any time. "Uh-oh," I said to his face, and grabbed the knife, turned it around and pushed it in. I wanted to see his face, but I couldn't. I could only hear him gasping for breath. I didn't want to take any chances, so I gave the knife a full twist. I felt it squishing his tissues. I heard the blood gushing out, which covered my hands. He finally fell on the ground with a thud and stopped moving. Now the game was over. I was right. This is so... I finished what I was going to say just before he cut the power. Messy. Well, I couldn't even celebrate my victory, because then I heard a car pulling up in the driveway. Oh, shit, they're here. I don't even have time. Oh, this bastard ruined my plan. I looked at the dead man. There was only one thing I could do now. I pulled the knife out of his chest, wiped it on his clothes, and dashed to the door. I hid behind the door, and I smiled because I knew that nobody would ruin my evening now. After all, there were only 2 serial killers in the city that night, and one was lying dead in the storeroom, while the other was standing behind the door, holding a knife in his hand, smiling.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. It really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams, and bye-bye.